The wagon lurched violently as another bullet struck the wooden sideboard, and Hannah Emerson pressed herself flat against the rough planks, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. The Texas plains stretched endlessly around them, offering no shelter, no hope, only dust and death under the merciless August sun of 1878. Her father's trading caravan had been ambushed 3 miles outside of Clifton, and now 6 good men lay bleeding or dead in the dirt, while the remaining defenders fought desperately against what seemed like impossible odds. The gunfire crackled like fireworks, sharp and terrifying, and Hannah squeezed her eyes shut as another scream pierced the air. She was 20 years old, unmarried, and had traveled from Boston to join her father in his trading business only 2 weeks ago. The West was supposed to be an adventure, a chance to see the vast territories her father had written about in his letters. Instead, it had become a nightmare of smoke and blood. "Hold your fire." Her father's voice rang out suddenly, hoarse and desperate. Thomas Emerson was a proud man, built like a bull with iron gray hair and a stubborn jaw, but Hannah heard the defeat in his tone. "Hold your fire, damn it all." The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, Hannah could hear the wind whistling across the plains and the labored breathing of wounded men. She raised her head slowly, peering over the wagon's edge. A dozen men on horseback surrounded the caravan, their faces hard and weathered, their guns still trained on the wagons. They were not Indians as she had first feared in her panic, but white men, outlaws by the look of them, dangerous and rough. The leader sat his horse with easy confidence, a lean man with a dark beard and eyes like chips of flint. "Smart choice," the outlaw leader called out. His voice carried easily across the distance. "Now here's how this works. You give us what we want, we let you live. Simple as that." Hannah's father stood up slowly from behind an overturned barrel, his rifle lowered. Blood stained his sleeve where a bullet had grazed him. "What do you want?" "The cargo, take it. Just let my people go." The outlaw leader laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Oh, we will take the cargo, make no mistake, but that is not all." His eyes swept across the wagons and landed on Hannah. She felt a chill despite the heat. "The girl, we will take her too." "No," Thomas's voice cracked like a whip. "Absolutely not. Take everything else, but my daughter is not part of this negotiation." Hannah felt her blood turn to ice. She wanted to be brave, wanted to stand up and face this like the strong woman she believed herself to be, but terror locked her muscles in place. Around her, the few remaining men from the caravan shifted nervously, their weapons useless against the superior numbers surrounding them. "Then I guess we will just kill all of you and take everything anyway," the outlaw said with a casual shrug. "Your choice, old man. The girl lives, you live, most of your men live, or everybody dies right here on this dusty road. What will it be?" Before Thomas could answer, a new voice cut through the tension, calm and steady. "Or there is a third option you have not considered." Every head turned. A single rider approached from the east, his horse moving at an easy lope. Hannah's breath caught as she watched him come closer. He sat his saddle like he had been born there, a tall man in his mid-20s with sun-bleached brown hair, and a face that might have been carved from leather and determination. He wore simple cowboy clothes, nothing fancy, but there was something about the way he carried himself that made even the outlaws pay attention. 2 revolvers hung at his hips, and a rifle rested in the scabbard on his saddle. The outlaw leader shifted his horse to face the newcomer. "This does not concern you, cowboy. Ride on while you still can." The man brought his horse to a stop about 30 yards away, close enough to talk, far enough to react if shooting started. "Name is Jack Crawford," he said in that same calm voice, "and I am making it my concern." You boys are making a lot of noise out here, and I do not much care for men who threaten women. Jack Crawford, one of the outlaws, spoke up, his voice nervous. Wait, you mean the Crawford who worked for the Rangers? Hannah saw something flicker in the outlaw leader's eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but he covered it quickly with a sneer. That was years ago. Rangers let him go, I heard. Guess he was not good enough. Jack's expression did not change. I left on my own terms, got tired of the politics, but I still remember how to handle men like you, Pete Warren. Or should I say, remember how to take men like you in. Pretty sure there is still paper out on you in 3 counties. The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Hannah could barely breathe. She had no idea who this Jack Crawford was, but he had just ridden into a deadly situation to help strangers, and that took either tremendous courage or tremendous foolishness. Maybe both. Pete Warren's face darkened. So what is this third option you mentioned? Because from where I sit, you are 1 man against 12. The third option is you ride away right now with your lives, Jack said. Leave these people alone and I will not hunt you down later. Simple as that. Warren actually laughed at that, though it sounded forced. You really think you can take all of us? I know I can take you, Jack replied, and there was no boast in it, just statement of fact. Maybe 3 or 4 others before the rest cut me down. Question is, are you willing to be one of the ones who does not ride away? Because I promise you, Pete, you will be first. The silence stretched long enough that Hannah thought she might scream. Then Warren made a gesture and his men lowered their weapons slightly. Fine, he spat. We will leave your precious caravan alone this time, but this is not over, Crawford. Yes, it is, Jack said quietly. And Pete, if I hear about you bothering travelers on this road again, I will come looking for you. That is not a threat. That is a promise. For a long moment, Hannah thought Warren might actually test Jack's words. His hand hovered near his gun, and she could see the calculation in his eyes. But then he jerked his horse's reins savagely and wheeled away. Let us go, boys. This whole thing has gone sour anyway. The outlaws thundered away across the plains, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Hannah finally let herself breathe, her whole body shaking with relief. Around her, the surviving men from the caravan were emerging from cover, checking on the wounded, beginning the grim task of seeing who had lived and who had not. Jack Crawford walked his horse forward slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. Thomas Emerson moved to meet him, and Hannah climbed down from the wagon on trembling legs. That was either the bravest thing I have ever seen or the stupidest, Thomas said, extending his hand. Thomas Emerson, and I owe you my daughter's life. My whole caravan's lives, truth be told. Jack shook his hand briefly. Just happened to be riding past. Could not in good conscience leave folks to wolves like Warren. Hannah stepped closer, and Jack's eyes met hers for the first time. They were blue-gray, she noticed, the color of sky before a storm, and there was something in them that made her feel both safer and more uncertain at the same time. Thank you, she said, and her voice only shook a little. That man was going to take me. Yes, madam, he was, Jack agreed. And I am glad I showed up when I did. He looked back at Thomas. But Warren was not lying when he said this is not over. He is mean enough to hold a grudge, and he knows I will not always be around to run him off. You folks heading to Clifton? We were, Thomas said grimly. Though I am not sure what state we will be in when we arrive now. Lost 4 men, got 3 more wounded, and we still have 20 miles to cover. Jack was quiet for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. I will ride with you. Make sure you get there safely. After that, well, we can figure out what comes next. We cannot pay you much, Thomas warned. This ambush cost me most of my profits. Did not ask for pay, Jack said simply. Just seems like the right thing to do. Over the next hour, as the caravan regrouped and tended to the wounded, Hannah found herself stealing glances at their unexpected guardian. Jack helped bury the dead with quiet efficiency, said a few simple words over the graves, and then assisted in redistributing supplies so the wounded could ride more comfortably. He spoke little, but when he did, people listened. There was an authority about him that had nothing to do with being loud or aggressive, and everything to do with competence and calm. When they finally got moving again, the sun was sliding toward the western horizon, painting the plains in shades of gold and amber. Jack rode at the front of the column, and Hannah found herself driving her wagon closer to him, wanting to be near someone who seemed so certain in this uncertain place. "You were really a Texas Ranger?" she asked after they had been riding for an hour in silence. Jack glanced over at her, a slight smile touching his lips. It transformed his serious face, making him look younger, more approachable. "For 3 years. Joined when I was 21, left when I was 24. That was about a year ago now. Why did you leave, if you do not mind me asking?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Rangers do good work, most of them. But there were things I was asked to do, orders I was given, that did not sit right with me. Decided I would rather make my own way, choose my own causes. Maybe that makes me a fool, but I sleep better at night." Hannah heard something in his voice, an old pain carefully controlled. "I think it makes you honorable," she said softly. He looked at her again, something shifting in those storm-colored eyes. "You just got here from back east, I am guessing. Boston, maybe Philadelphia." "Boston," she confirmed. "How did you know? The way you talk, the way you dress." His eyes flicked to her traveling dress, practical but well-made and definitely not Western in style. "And the fact that you seem surprised that men out here might do the right thing without expecting payment. That kind of hopeful view usually comes from folks who have not been West long." She felt herself bristle slightly. "I am not naive, Mr. Crawford. I know the world can be cruel. But I also believe that good people exist everywhere in Boston and in Texas. You just proved that yourself." The smile touched his lips again, warmer this time. "Fair point, Miss Emerson, and call me Jack. We saved each other's lives today. Seems like that puts us past the formality stage." "Hannah," she replied, "and technically you saved my life. I did not do much of anything except hide in a wagon. You stayed calm, did not do anything foolish that might have gotten people killed. That counts for more than you might think." He looked ahead, scanning the horizon with eyes that missed nothing. "Your father mentioned you just arrived. You planning to stay out here, or is this just a visit?" "I plan to stay," Hannah said firmly. "My mother passed away last winter and Boston felt empty without her." Father's letters always made Texas sound so alive, so full of possibility. I wanted to be part of that, to help him build something here. "It is alive, all right," Jack agreed. "Question is whether you are ready for just how alive it can get. Today was not unusual out here, Hannah. Might even have been mild compared to some of what happens on these roads." She lifted her chin. "Then I suppose I will have to learn quickly. I am not planning to run back east with my tail between my legs just because things get difficult." He studied her for a long moment, and she met his gaze steadily. Finally, he nodded. "I believe you. You have got steel in you, I can tell. Just make sure you temper it with wisdom. Bravery without sense gets people killed out here." They rode on as the sun set, the sky turning deep purple and scattered with stars so bright Hannah caught her breath. She had seen stars in Boston, of course, but never like this, never so many and so clear. It was like riding under a blanket of diamonds. They made camp a few miles outside of Clifton, not wanting to arrive in darkness. Jack took the first watch, sitting at the edge of the firelight with his rifle across his knees. Hannah found she could not sleep, her mind too full of the day's events, so she got up and walked over to sit near him. "Should not you be resting?" Jack asked quietly, not looking at her but somehow aware of her presence. "Should not you?" she countered. "I will sleep later. Someone needs to keep watch." "What happens when we reach Clifton?" Hannah asked. "Will you really stay with us, or was that just something you said to make my father feel better?" Now he did look at her, his face half in shadow. "I do not say things I do not mean, but I will be honest with you, Hannah. Clifton is not a gentle town. It is rough, full of cowboys and drifters and miners passing through. You will need to be careful there, especially until Warren forgets about today. He is the type to hold onto a grudge. Will you stay long enough to make sure we are settled safely?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended, but she did not take it back. "I will stay as long as you need me," Jack said simply. "Truth is, I have been drifting for the past year, no real destination in mind. Clifton is as good a place as any to stop for a while." Something warm bloomed in Hannah's chest at those words, though she was not quite ready to examine what that feeling meant. "Thank you, Jack, for everything." He nodded but did not say anything more, and they sat together in comfortable silence while the stars wheeled overhead and the plains stretched out forever in all directions. They reached Clifton the next afternoon, and Hannah got her first real look at what would be her new home. The town sprawled along both sides of a dusty main street, a collection of wooden buildings that looked like they had been thrown up quickly and maintained reluctantly. There was a saloon, a general store, a church with a leaning steeple, a livery stable, and various other establishments that seemed to blend into each other. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, mostly men in rough clothes, though she spotted a few women in simple dresses. Thomas had contacts in town, and he directed the wagons to a large warehouse on the eastern edge where he stored his trading goods. Jack stayed close the whole time, his presence a quiet reassurance. Hannah noticed how people looked at him, some with recognition, others with wariness. Clearly his reputation had reached Clifton. Once the wagons were secured and the wounded men taken to the town's small doctor, Thomas turned to Jack. "You have done more than enough for us, Jack. But if you are serious about staying around for a while, I have a proposal for you." Jack waited, his expression neutral. "I need a foreman, someone who can protect my operations and keep my people safe. After what happened yesterday, I know Warren is not going to be the only threat. There are others who would love to take what I have built. I will pay you fair wages, give you a place to stay, and all I ask in return is that you keep my caravan routes safe and my daughter out of danger." "Father," Hannah protested, embarrassed, "I do not need a personal guardian." "Yes, you do," Thomas said bluntly, "and I need someone I can trust. Jack, I saw how you handled Warren. I need that kind of strength and judgment working for me. What do you say?" Jack was quiet, and Hannah found herself holding her breath, wanting him to say yes more than she wanted to admit. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but I have conditions. I will not do anything that goes against my conscience, and if I see you doing business that is not honorable, I walk away. No arguments." Thomas's eyebrows rose, but then he laughed. "You are a hard man, Jack Crawford. I like that. Deal." He extended his hand and they shook on it. Over the following weeks, Hannah began to understand the rhythms of life in Clifton. She helped her father with his business, learning the accounting and the trading routes, meeting the merchants and ranchers who relied on Thomas's caravans. She also began to understand just how much danger they had been in during the ambush and how much danger still surrounded them daily. Jack was a constant presence, always watching, always aware. He hired additional guards for the warehouse, vetted each man personally, and instituted new protocols for the caravan routes. But he also did something unexpected. He began teaching Hannah how to defend herself. "I am not saying you should go looking for trouble," he told her one evening when he showed her how to properly hold and fire a revolver. "But if trouble finds you, you need to be able to handle it, at least long enough to get to safety." His hands were warm and calloused as he adjusted her grip on the weapon, standing close enough that she could smell leather and soap and something uniquely him. Her heart beat faster, though she told herself it was just nerves about the gun. "Like this?" she asked, aiming at the target he had set up behind the warehouse. "Exactly like that. Now squeeze the trigger, do not pull, steady pressure." The gun bucked in her hand and the shot went wild, missing the target completely, but Jack just smiled. "Better than most first attempts, try again." They spent an hour practicing as the sun set, and by the end, Hannah managed to hit the target twice. Jack praised her progress, and the warmth in his voice made her feel like she had accomplished something genuinely important. "You are a good teacher," she said as they walked back toward the main part of town, where her father had rented rooms above the general store for them to live in. "You are a good student," Jack replied. "Not everyone can stay calm around firearms. Some people freeze up." "I suppose after the ambush, guns do not frighten me as much as they should," Hannah admitted. "Or maybe I've just gotten used to the idea that danger is part of life out here." "Do not get too used to it," Jack warned gently. "The day you stop being at least a little afraid is the day you start making deadly mistakes. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. The trick is not letting it control you." They walked in silence for a moment, and then Hannah asked something she had been wondering about for days. "Jack, why did you really agree to work for my father? You could have just escorted us to town and moved on. Why stay?" He was quiet so long she thought he would not answer. They had reached the bottom of the stairs leading up to her rooms, and he stopped, turning to face her in the gathering dusk. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself. Part of it is that your father is a good man and good men deserve loyal help. Part of it is that Warren is still out there and I do not trust him to let things lie, and part of it is—" He trailed off and their eyes met. Hannah's breath caught. She had known, on some level, that something was building between them, a connection that went beyond gratitude or proximity. But seeing it acknowledged in his expression made it suddenly, terrifyingly real. "Part of it is that I wanted to stay near you," Jack finished quietly. "I know that is probably not appropriate to say. You are my employer's daughter, and I am just a cowboy with a checkered past. But I do not believe in being dishonest about important things, and this feels important." Hannah's heart was racing now, and not from fear. "It is important," she whispered. "To me too. I have been hoping you would stay, hoping you felt something of what I have been feeling." Jack reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "I am not going anywhere, Hannah." "Not unless you want me to." "I do not want you to," she said firmly. "I want you to stay. I want to see where this leads." The smile that lit his face was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. He lifted her hand and pressed a brief, gentle kiss to her knuckles, a gesture that felt more intimate than it should have. "Then I will stay as long as you will have me." The next few months passed in a blur of work and growing affection. Thomas's business flourished under Jack's protection, and no more ambushes troubled the caravans. Hannah learned the intricacies of running a trading operation while simultaneously discovering the depths of her feelings for Jack Crawford. He courted her properly, with Thomas's grudging permission, taking her on supervised walks through town, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings while they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on a ranch in southern Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, about joining the Rangers because he wanted to make a difference and leaving because the job had asked him to compromise too much of who he was. She told him about Boston, about her mother's long illness and death, about feeling lost in the city after that loss and knowing she needed to find her father, needed to be part of something bigger than her own grief. They talked about books and horses, about theology and practicality, about the future of Texas and the future of themselves. One evening in early November, as they sat on the porch watching the first stars appear, Jack said, "There is something I need to tell you about what happened when I left the Rangers." Hannah heard the seriousness in his tone and set down the mending she had been working on. "What is it?" Jack stared out at the darkening street. "I told you I left because I did not agree with some of the orders I was given. What I did not tell you is that those orders involved a raid on a small settlement of farmers, mostly Mexican families who had been living on land the local cattle barons wanted. The Rangers were supposed to run them off by force if necessary." "What did you do?" Hannah asked softly. "I refused. Told my captain those were innocent people with legal claim to their land, and I would not be part of driving them away. He said if I did not follow orders, I was done with the Rangers, so I turned in my badge right there." He looked at her, his eyes shadowed. "The other Rangers went ahead with the raid. 2 people died, including a child. I found out about it a week later." Hannah reached over and took his hand. "You did the right thing, Jack. You cannot blame yourself for what others chose to do after you left." "I know that, logically," Jack said, "but I still wonder sometimes if I could have done more, if I could have stopped it somehow." "You stood up for what was right, even when it cost you," Hannah said firmly. "That takes tremendous courage. It is part of why I love you." The words were out before she could stop them, hanging in the air between them. Jack went very still, then slowly turned to face her fully. "You love me?" he asked, his voice rough. Hannah swallowed hard but did not look away. "Yes, I think I have for weeks now, maybe since that first day when you rode in to save us. I love who you are, Jack Crawford. Your honor, your kindness, your strength. I love you." Jack stood up, pulling her to her feet with him, and cupped her face in his hands. "Hannah Emerson, I have loved you since the moment you climbed out of that wagon looking terrified but determined not to show it. I have been trying to court you properly, give you time to be sure, but if you are sure now, then I am going to do something I have been wanting to do for months." "What is that?" she whispered. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, but when she melted into him, her arms coming up around his neck, it deepened into something more passionate, more real. It was her first kiss, and it felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Hannah. I know I do not have much to offer you. I am just a cowboy with a little bit of savings and a reputation that is sometimes more burden than blessing. But I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Hannah said without hesitation. "Yes, Jack, I will marry you." Thomas had mixed feelings about the engagement at first. He liked Jack, respected him, but he had hoped his daughter might find someone with more prospects, more stability. But when he saw the joy in Hannah's eyes and the devotion in Jack's, he could not deny them his blessing. They were married in early December of 1878 in the small leaning church in Clifton. The ceremony was simple, attended by the handful of friends they had made in town and the men who worked for Thomas's trading company. Hannah wore a dress she had brought from Boston, pale blue silk that her mother had helped her choose, and Jack wore his best clothes with a new black vest. When they exchanged vows, Hannah's voice was steady and sure, and Jack's eyes shone with emotion. The town threw them a small celebration afterward, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible from such a rough place. Hannah danced with Jack until her feet ached, laughing more freely than she had since her mother's death, feeling like she had finally found where she belonged. They spent their wedding night in a small house Jack had managed to buy on the outskirts of town, a modest two-room structure that he had been fixing up in secret for weeks. It was not fancy, but he had made it clean and comfortable, with wildflowers in jars on the table and a new quilt on the bed. Hannah stood in the doorway, looking around at what would be their home, and felt tears prick her eyes. "Jack, it is perfect." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It is not what you grew up with in Boston." "It is better," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "It is ours." That night, they became husband and wife in every sense, and Hannah discovered that love could be not just emotional but physical, tender and overwhelming all at once. Jack was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and when she fell asleep in his arms hours later, she felt more complete than she ever had in her life. The months that followed were some of the happiest Hannah could remember. She continued helping her father with the business, and Jack continued protecting the caravans and maintaining security. But now they had a home together, a life they were building side by side. In early spring of 1879, Hannah realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. When she told Jack her suspicion that she might be with child, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he said, setting her down carefully like she might break. "You are going to be a mother." "And you are going to be a father," Hannah replied, smiling through happy tears. "Are you ready for that?" "Probably not," Jack admitted, "but I cannot wait to try." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat was brutal, and Hannah spent many days feeling exhausted and sick. But Jack was attentive and patient, bringing her cool water and sitting with her during the worst moments, talking to her about anything and everything to take her mind off the discomfort. In late October, as the weather finally began to cool, Hannah went into labor. It lasted nearly 20 hours, long and difficult, and there were moments when Jack, pacing outside the room where the midwife worked, feared he might lose her. But Hannah was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and just after dawn on October 23, 1879, she delivered a healthy baby boy. Jack was allowed in to see them a few minutes later. Hannah lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, but she was smiling as she held their son. "Come meet your boy," she said softly. Jack approached almost shyly, looking down at the tiny red-faced infant in Hannah's arms. "He is so small," he whispered in awe. "He will grow," Hannah assured him. "Do you want to hold him?" Jack sat carefully on the edge of the bed and let Hannah place their son in his arms. The baby was wrapped in a soft blanket, his eyes closed, his little fists waving slightly. Jack felt something break open in his chest, a love so powerful it almost frightened him. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. Jack thought for a moment. "Thomas, after your father. He brought you out here, which brought you to me. Seems fitting to honor that." Hannah smiled. "Thomas Crawford." "I like that. Tommy for short." "Tommy," Jack repeated, testing the name. The baby yawned and Jack laughed softly. "Welcome to the world, Tommy. Your mother and I are going to do our best by you, I promise." As the child grew from infant to toddler, life in Clifton continued to evolve. Thomas Emerson's trading business became one of the most successful in that part of Texas, and much of that success was due to Jack's management and Hannah's organizational skills. They were partners in every sense, in marriage and in work, and the respect they showed each other set an example for others in the rough frontier town. Tommy was a bright, active child with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. He adored his father and followed Jack everywhere he was allowed, learning about horses and ranching and the land. Jack was patient with him, teaching him to be kind but strong, to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. When Tommy was 3 in the winter of 1882, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the summer of 1883, she delivered twin girls. They named them Mary, after Hannah's mother, and Elizabeth, after Jack's mother. The twins had Jack's lighter hair but Hannah's brown eyes, and they were a double handful from the moment they arrived. The little house on the edge of town became too small for their growing family, so Jack and some of the men who worked for Thomas built an addition, giving them 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. It still was not fancy by Boston standards, but it was comfortable and filled with love. One evening in the fall of 1883, after the children were all asleep, Hannah and Jack sat on their porch watching the stars. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of long days. "You ever regret it?" Hannah asked. "Giving up your freedom to take on a wife and children? You could have kept drifting, kept being the lone cowboy with no ties." Jack took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Not for a single second. Hannah, before I met you, I was existing, not really living. Just moving from place to place with no purpose beyond the next day. You gave me something to build toward, something to protect and cherish. Our children, our home, our life together. That is everything I never knew I wanted and everything I will ever need." "I feel the same way," Hannah said softly. "When I left Boston, I thought I was just running from grief. But I was actually running toward this, toward you, toward the life we have built. I have never been happier." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Jack said, "I got a letter today, from Pete Warren." Hannah tensed. They had not heard anything about the outlaw in years, and she had hoped he had forgotten about them. "What did it say?" "He is dying," Jack said quietly. "Some kind of fever he picked up in Mexico. He wanted me to know that he let go of the grudge a long time ago, that he respects what we did that day and how we handled ourselves. He said to tell you that you picked a good man and he was sorry for frightening you." Hannah was quiet, processing this. "Do you believe him?" "I do, actually." There was something in the letter, the way it was written. I think facing death made him see things differently. He is not asking for forgiveness or anything like that, just wanted to set things straight before he goes. "That is sad," Hannah said. "Even men like Warren deserve a chance at redemption, I suppose." "Everyone deserves that chance," Jack agreed. "Question is whether they take it." As the years passed, the Crawford family grew deeper roots in Clifton. Jack became not just Thomas's foreman, but eventually his partner. And when Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1888, he left the entire trading business to Hannah and Jack jointly. They renamed it Emerson Crawford Trading Company in his honor. Tommy grew into a responsible young man who helped manage the business. The twins grew into spirited young women who kept their parents on their toes with their intelligence and determination. In 1889, Hannah gave birth to one more child, a daughter they named Grace, who seemed to be the perfect blend of all the best parts of both parents. Life was not without challenges. There were droughts that affected business, conflicts with competitors, and the general difficulties of raising a family on the frontier. But through it all, Hannah and Jack faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year rather than fading. One evening in the spring of 1895, when Tommy was 15 and already taller than his father, when the twins were almost 12 and Grace was 6, the whole family sat together on the expanded porch Jack had built. The trading business was thriving, the children were healthy and happy, and Hannah and Jack had been married for over 16 years. "Tell us the story again," Grace demanded, climbing into her father's lap despite being almost too big for it. "About how you and Mama met." Jack and Hannah exchanged amused glances. Their children never tired of hearing this story. "Well," Jack began, "it was a hot August day in 1878, and I was just a cowboy riding across the Texas plains with no particular destination in mind. And then I heard gunshots." Hannah picked up the story. "Our caravan had been ambushed by outlaws. I was terrified, hiding in a wagon, and this bad man said he was going to take me away. I thought it was all over. But then Papa rode in," Tommy interjected, even though he knew the story by heart. "That is right," Jack continued. "And I took one look at your mother, saw how brave she was being even though she was scared, and I knew right then that my drifting days were over. I just did not know it yet." "And then you escorted us to Clifton," Hannah said, smiling at her husband. "And you asked to stay. Not just for a while, but forever." "Best decision I ever made," Jack said, meeting her eyes. Even after all these years, Hannah felt her heart flutter at the love she saw there. "That is so romantic," one of the twins, Mary, sighed. "I want someone to love me like that someday." "You will," Hannah assured her daughter. "When you are old enough and you find the right person. Love has a way of finding us when we least expect it." That night, after all the children were finally in bed, Hannah and Jack stood on their porch one more time, looking out at the town that had become their home. Clifton had grown over the years, becoming more civilized but never losing its frontier character. They had been part of that growth, helping shape the town into a place where families could thrive. "You remember what you said to me the night you proposed?" Hannah asked, leaning against Jack's solid warmth. "I said I did not have much to offer you except my love," Jack replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You were wrong about that," Hannah said. "You gave me everything. A home, a family, a partnership, a life full of purpose and joy. You gave me more than I ever dreamed of having." Jack turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You gave me the same, Hannah. Before you, I was just a man with a gun and a horse, drifting from place to place. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something lasting. You gave me love and children and a life worth living." "We gave each other those things," Hannah corrected softly. "That is what partnership means." They kissed, still as passionate after 16 years as they had been on their wedding night, still discovering new depths to their love. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Forever," Jack said quietly. "That is what I asked for when I asked to stay, forever with you." "And forever is what you got," Hannah replied. "Forever is what we both got." Inside the house, their children slept safely. Outside, the Texas plains stretched endlessly under a blanket of stars. And on that porch, the cowboy who had once been a drifter and the Boston girl who had come west seeking something she could not name stood together. Having found in each other everything they had never known they were looking for. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. In 1897, when Tommy turned 18, he announced his intention to expand the family business into ranching, combining what Jack had taught him about cattle and land management with what he had learned from his mother about commerce and trade. Hannah and Jack supported his ambitions, helping him acquire land north of Clifton, where he established the Crawford Ranch. The twins, Mary and Elizabeth, both showed aptitude for learning that exceeded what the small school in Clifton could provide. After much discussion and some tears, Hannah and Jack made the difficult decision to send them to a boarding school in San Antonio where they could receive a proper education. It was hard to watch them leave, but both parents knew it was the right choice. Grace, their youngest, became Hannah's constant companion, learning the intricacies of running the trading business. She had a head for numbers that amazed even her mother, and by the time she was 10, she was helping with the accounting books. In 1899, a new threat emerged that tested everything Jack had built. A railroad company wanted to run tracks through Clifton, which would bring growth and prosperity, but they were using strong-arm tactics to acquire land, threatening and intimidating property owners who would not sell at the company's offered prices. When the railroad's agents approached Jack and Hannah about acquiring the trading company's warehouses and land, Jack listened politely to their offer and then equally politely declined. The company's representative, a cold-eyed man named Harris, did not take the refusal well. "You are making a mistake, Crawford," Harris said. "This railroad is coming through whether you cooperate or not. Better to take our generous offer now than to regret it later." Jack stood up, his full height and presence making Harris take an involuntary step back. "I have dealt with bullies and threats my whole life, Harris. I have faced down outlaws and killers, and you do not frighten me. My wife and I built this business from nothing, and we are not selling to anyone who thinks threats will work. Now get out of my office." Harris left, but not before promising that Jack would regret his decision. Over the following weeks, several suspicious incidents occurred. Wagons were sabotaged, shipments went missing, and there were attempts to intimidate the company's employees. But Jack had not been a Texas Ranger for nothing. He gathered evidence, documented everything, and when he had enough, he took it to the territorial governor himself. The resulting investigation exposed the railroad company's illegal tactics and led to criminal charges against several company officials, including Harris. The railroad still came to Clifton eventually, but under new management that dealt fairly with property owners. Jack and Hannah negotiated a fair price for some land the railroad needed for the station, which gave them capital to further expand their business. Throughout all of this, Hannah was Jack's partner and strategist. While he dealt with the physical threats and confrontations, she managed the legal and business aspects, working with lawyers and government officials to ensure they had protection under the law. Together, they were formidable. One evening after the railroad situation was finally resolved, as they sat on their porch in the warm summer night of 1900, Hannah said, "We make a good team." Jack laughed. "That is an understatement. You are brilliant, Hannah. The way you navigated all those legal complexities, the way you never backed down even when things got dangerous. I am in awe of you." "We each have our strengths," Hannah said modestly, "but I do think we are stronger together than either of us would be alone." "Definitely," Jack agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, when I rode up to that ambush all those years ago, I never imagined this would be my life. Running a successful business, raising incredible children, married to the most remarkable woman I have ever known. Sometimes I still cannot quite believe it is real." "It is real," Hannah assured him, taking his hand, "and it is ours. Everything we have built, everything we have created, we did it together." In 1902, Tommy got married to a rancher's daughter named Sarah, a strong, capable woman who reminded Jack and Hannah very much of themselves at that age. The wedding was a grand affair, the biggest celebration Clifton had seen in years, and watching their son exchange vows brought tears to both Jack's and Hannah's eyes. "He looks so grown up," Hannah whispered to Jack during the ceremony. "He is grown up," Jack replied. "And he is going to be just fine. We raised him well." Tommy and Sarah settled on the Crawford Ranch, and within a year, Hannah and Jack became grandparents when Sarah gave birth to a son. Holding her first grandchild, Hannah felt the circle of life continuing, felt the legacy she and Jack were creating extending into the future. The twins returned from school in 1903, both educated and cultured, but still very much their parents' daughters. Mary announced her intention to become a teacher and opened the first proper school in Clifton, while Elizabeth shocked everyone by declaring she wanted to study medicine and become a doctor. It was an unusual ambition for a woman, but Jack and Hannah supported her completely, helping her gain admission to a medical college in Austin. Grace, at 14, was already showing signs of being a natural leader. She had taken over most of the daily operations of the trading company, freeing Hannah and Jack to focus on larger strategic decisions and to enjoy their growing family. In the spring of 1905, Pete Warren's prediction from so many years ago came full circle in an unexpected way. A young man appeared at the trading company office, dusty from travel, asking to speak with Jack Crawford. When Jack came out, the young man introduced himself as William Warren, Pete's son. "My father died 6 years ago," William said. "But before he passed, he told me about you, about the day you faced him down to protect a caravan. He said you were the kind of man he wished he had been. He asked me to live differently than he did, to be honorable and good. I have been trying, sir, and I heard you might be looking for reliable men to work for your company." Jack studied the young man for a long moment. He saw no trace of Pete's cruelty in William's face, only earnestness and hope. "What skills do you have?" "I am good with horses, good with ledgers, and I am honest," William said simply. "I cannot offer much more than that, but I promise you will not regret giving me a chance." Jack made his decision. "All right, William Warren, let us see what you can do. You will start tomorrow morning." That evening, he told Hannah about the encounter. She listened thoughtfully, then smiled. "Your capacity for forgiveness and second chances is one of the things I love most about you, Jack. That young man will never forget that you gave him an opportunity when you had every reason to turn him away." "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their parents," Jack said. "We have been blessed with children who are better than us. William deserves the same opportunity." William Warren proved to be an excellent employee, hardworking and loyal. Over time, he became one of Jack's most trusted men, and the irony was not lost on anyone that the son of the outlaw who had once threatened to kidnap Hannah now worked to protect the Crawford family's interests. The years moved faster as Jack and Hannah aged. By 1910, they were both in their early 50s, still active and healthy but feeling the weight of years more than they once had. Tommy's ranch was thriving, and he and Sarah had given them 3 grandchildren. Mary's school had expanded to 2 buildings and educated over 60 children. Elizabeth had completed her medical training and returned to Clifton as the town's first female doctor. Grace had married a lawyer from Dallas, though they chose to live in Clifton, and she continued to run the trading company with her characteristic efficiency. One afternoon in the fall of that year, Jack came home from the office to find Hannah sitting on the porch with an old leather-bound book in her lap. As he got closer, he realized she was crying softly. "Hannah, what is wrong?" He sat beside her, concern flooding through him. She smiled through her tears. "Nothing is wrong. I was just looking through this." She held up the book, and Jack saw it was a journal. "I started keeping it the day we arrived in Clifton, and I have been writing in it ever since. 32 years of our life together, all recorded here." Jack put his arm around her shoulders. "Why the tears?" "Because I was reading back through some of the early entries, remembering how frightened I was that day of the ambush, how uncertain I was about my decision to come west. And then you appeared, like something out of a dream, and everything changed." She looked up at him, her eyes still wet but shining with love. "Jack Crawford, you saved me that day, but not just from Pete Warren. You saved me from a life of loneliness and grief. You gave me purpose and joy and a family beyond anything I ever imagined." Jack felt his own eyes prick with tears. You saved me too, Hannah, from a life of drifting and emptiness. You gave me a home, not just a house, but a real home in every sense of the word. They held each other on that porch, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. As 1912 dawned, bringing with it talk of automobiles and airplanes and all manner of modern inventions, Jack and Hannah celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary. The little house had been expanded and renovated so many times it barely resembled its original form, but they had never considered leaving it. Too many memories lived in those walls. Their children had all found their own paths and were thriving. Their grandchildren were growing up healthy and strong. The Emerson Crawford Trading Company had become one of the most respected businesses in Texas. And through it all, Jack and Hannah had remained partners and lovers, best friends and confidants. One summer evening in 1913, as they sat in their customary place on the porch, Grace came to visit with surprising news. "Mother, Father, I wanted you to be the first to know. William Warren has asked me to marry him, and I have accepted." Hannah and Jack looked at each other in surprise, then back at their daughter. "William Warren," Jack repeated. "How long has this been going on?" Grace had the grace to blush. "About a year now. We have been trying to keep it quiet because we knew people might find it strange, given his father's history. But he is a good man, Father. You know he is. You have seen it yourself over these 8 years he has worked for us." "I do know he is a good man," Jack agreed slowly. "And if he is the man you love, then your mother and I will support that." He looked at Hannah, who nodded her agreement. "We will support it completely," Hannah added. "Grace, you have always been an excellent judge of character. If you love William, then we trust that judgment." The wedding took place that fall, and it was a testament to how much the community had grown to respect William, that no one made an issue of his father's past. He had proven himself through years of honest work and honorable living. Standing at the back of the church, watching another of their children marry, Hannah leaned against Jack and whispered, "Do you see how everything came full circle? The son of the man who tried to take me is now part of our family." "Life has a way of surprising us," Jack replied softly. "Thank God it does." As the years continued to pass, Jack and Hannah gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the business, trusting their children and grandchildren to carry on what they had built. They spent more time together, taking long rides out onto the plains where Jack had first found her all those decades ago, visiting with their growing family, and simply enjoying the life they had created. In the spring of 1918, as America was embroiled in the Great War overseas, Jack and Hannah celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. All of their children and grandchildren gathered in Clifton for the occasion, and the celebration lasted 3 days. People came from all over Texas to honor the couple who had become legends in their own right, not for anything flashy or dramatic, but for building a good life through hard work, integrity, and unwavering love for each other. On the actual day of their anniversary, Jack and Hannah escaped the crowds for a few hours, riding out to the spot where they had spent their first night after the ambush, where Jack had taken first watch and Hannah had come to sit beside him. It looked much the same as it had 40 years earlier, the plains stretching endlessly in all directions, the sky vast and blue overhead. They sat on a blanket, holding hands and watching the horizon. 40 years, Hannah marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I prefer the second feeling, Jack said with a smile. He was 62 now, his hair completely gray, his face lined with years of sun and experience. But his eyes were still the same storm-colored gray-blue, and they still looked at Hannah with the same love they had 40 years ago. Hannah, at 60, still had the spirit and determination that had first caught Jack's attention. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her hands showed the work of decades, but she remained beautiful to Jack, more so now than ever. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Hannah asked. "When I asked if you would really stay with us." "I said I would stay as long as you needed me," Jack replied. "And you have needed me every day since, which is fortunate because I have needed you just as much." "More than needed," Hannah corrected. "Wanted, chosen, loved." She turned to look at him fully. "Jack Crawford, you rode into my life when I needed saving, but you stayed because we chose each other. Every day for 40 years, we have chosen each other, and I would choose you every time in every life, in every circumstance." Jack pulled her close, kissing her with all the tenderness of decades of love. "And I would choose you, Hannah, always and forever." They sat there until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, just as it had on that first night so long ago. The plains were the same, the sky was the same, but they were different, transformed by love and time and the life they had built together. As 1920 dawned, bringing with it a new decade and continued changes to the world, Jack and Hannah settled into the comfortable rhythm of their later years. They were grandparents many times over now, and even great-grandparents to 2 children. The Emerson Crawford Trading Company had evolved with the times, adapting to automobiles and modern business practices, while maintaining the integrity that Jack and Hannah had instilled from the beginning. One afternoon in early autumn of 1922, Jack came in from working in the garden he had planted behind their house. At 66, he still insisted on staying active, though Hannah worried about him overexerting himself. He sat down heavily in his favorite chair, looking tired. "Are you feeling all right?" Hannah asked, setting aside her sewing. "Just tired," Jack replied. "Getting old, I suppose." But over the following weeks his fatigue deepened. He began having chest pains, and despite Elizabeth's best efforts as his doctor and daughter, it became clear that his heart was failing. He was moved to the bedroom, and the family gathered, everyone understanding that their time with the patriarch was drawing to a close. Hannah rarely left his side. She sat beside the bed, holding his hand, talking to him about their life together, reminding him of all the good times and the love they had shared. Jack remained alert and present, more concerned about her than himself. "You have to promise me something," he said one evening when they were alone, his voice weak but clear. "Anything," Hannah replied, tears already forming. "Promise me you will not mourn too long. You still have years ahead of you, and I want you to live them fully. Spend time with our children and grandchildren. Keep the business going. Be happy, Hannah. That is all I have ever wanted for you." "How can I be happy without you?" Hannah asked, the tears falling freely now. "You have been my whole world for 44 years." "And you have been mine," Jack said, squeezing her hand with what little strength he had. "But our love does not end just because I do. It will live on in our children, in the business we built, in every life we touched. That is what we created together, Hannah. Something that lasts beyond our individual lives." He paused, gathering his breath, then continued. "That day I rode up to the ambush and saw you for the first time, I had no idea what I was riding toward. I thought I was just helping some strangers in trouble. But I was really riding toward my whole life, toward everything that would ever matter to me. You were my destination all along, Hannah Emerson. I just did not know it yet. And you were mine," Hannah whispered, leaning close to him. "Jack Crawford, you were and are the great love of my life. Thank you for saving me, for staying with me, for loving me so completely." "Forever," Jack said softly, echoing the word that had defined their marriage. "I asked to stay forever, and that is exactly what I got, forever with you." He passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his wife, children, and grandchildren. He was 66 years old and had lived a life full of honor, love, and purpose. The funeral was one of the largest Clifton had ever seen. People came from all over Texas to pay their respects to the cowboy who had once been a ranger, who had faced down outlaws and railroad bullies, who had built a business and a family and a legacy of integrity. But more than anything, they came to honor the love story that had inspired so many. The tale of the cowboy who had saved a woman in distress and stayed forever because she had saved him right back. Hannah stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and said a final goodbye to the man who had been her partner in all things. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she remembered his request that she not mourn too long, that she live fully whatever years remained to her. And she did. Over the years that followed, Hannah remained active in the business and the family. She wrote down the full story of her life with Jack, turning her journals into a complete memoir that would be treasured by generations of their descendants. She watched her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren be born. She saw the trading company continue to thrive under Grace and William's leadership. But every evening, she sat on the porch they had shared for so many years, looking out at the Texas plains, and she talked to Jack as if he were still beside her. She told him about the family, about the business, about all the small and large happenings of daily life. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right and the stars were particularly bright, she could almost feel him there, his presence a comfort and a promise. Hannah Emerson Crawford lived to be 92 years old, sharp-minded and strong-willed to the very end. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1954, she was surrounded by 4 generations of the family she and Jack had created. She was laid to rest beside Jack, and on her gravestone, below her name and dates, were carved the words Jack had spoken so long ago: forever. The Emerson Crawford Trading Company continued for many years, eventually evolving into a modern logistics and transportation firm, but never losing sight of the values its founders had established. The story of Jack and Hannah became family legend, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love that begins with salvation and grows into partnership. That starts with a cowboy riding to the rescue and becomes a lifetime of choosing each other every single day. In the end, Jack Crawford had asked to stay forever, and in every way that mattered, he had. His love, his legacy, his presence lived on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried his name and his values forward. He and Hannah had built something that transcended their individual lives, something that would endure as long as their descendants remembered the story of how a cowboy and a Boston girl met on the Texas plains and created a love that truly was forever. Their house in Clifton was eventually turned into a museum, preserving the story of their lives and the early days of the town. Visitors could see Hannah's journals, Jack's old ranger badge, photographs spanning decades of their life together, and the very porch where they had spent countless evenings talking under the stars. It became a symbol of what the West had been and what it could still inspire: courage, integrity, partnership, and enduring love. The story that had begun with gunfire and danger, and a cowboy riding to the rescue, had transformed into something far greater. A tale of 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, and built from that finding a life of purpose and joy that touched everyone around them. They had been saved by each other, stayed with each other, and loved each other forever, and that forever extended beyond death into legacy and memory, and the continuing story of the family they had created together. It was, in every sense, a love story for the ages, rooted in the wild and dangerous beauty of the Old West, but universal in its themes of sacrifice, choice, partnership, and devotion. Jack had escorted Hannah home and asked to stay forever, and in the best and truest sense, his request had been granted. They had forever, not just in the years they lived together, but in the eternal impact of the love they shared and the life they built, hand in hand, heart to heart, from that first desperate day on the Texas plains to the peaceful endings of their long and well-lived lives.